Hey everybody, Mike Griffith here, and welcome to today's Ingles on the Beat segment. A lot to talk about. Classic Georgia Notre Dame game. More classic than I thought it would be. Just full confession here. I didn't think there was any way this game could live up to what happened 2 years ago in South Bend, Indiana, and I think it did. I think the performance of the Georgia football team in the second half, particularly the third quarter, the halftime adjustments, showed that this is a team with championship potential. I thought that Notre Dame came out with a very good game plan and was prepared really well. At the end of the day, though, my biggest takeaway, is that I'd never seen a crowd have an effect on a game like that. And that's such a cliche. Every fan base believes that they affect the game. Every fan base claims to be the 12th man and have an effect. But I've never been at a game in the however many years, so 27 years of covering college football, where a home crowd has triggered 6 motion penalties and no less than 3 timeouts, probably 4 or 5, truth be known. And this was after Notre Dame prepared with 107 decibel noise inside their indoor football building. Brian Kelly was very confident that Notre Dame was going to be able to handle the noise. And he said in his post-game press conference, it was so loud, and he didn't use the word rattled, but I will. Those Notre Dame players were so rattled, Ian Book was so rattled, that he reverted to the clap. Even after they'd worked on the leg raise and the head bob from the center, he reverted to the clap. Now, Brian Kelly said it was because they'd repped it so much. But the fact of the matter is, without that Georgia football crowd, I'm not sure that Georgia wins that football game. Remember, there were 2 minutes left, and Notre Dame started at their own 48 with a chance to win that football game. If Notre Dame has those timeouts, they call that drive differently. And Kirby Smart said that. So this time when Kirby Smart talked about the crowd being the best ever, you better believe he believed it. And I've never seen 6 false starts. And it's not like anybody's ringing cowbells. It's not like anybody's bringing boat horns. Just noise and excitement from Sanford Stadium. A lot of Georgia fans tell me that was the biggest and best game in Sanford Stadium. They go back to 1982 Clemson, when the 2 previous national champions met. Georgia won the national championship in 80, Clemson won in 81, and Georgia beat Clemson 13-7. The Bulldogs were ranked number 7, playing a number 11 Clemson team. Now, obviously wasn't there for that, but I'm sure some of the folks watching were, and you can weigh in on your comments. I want to do some Tuesday takeaways from this game. Georgia now has won 16 straight home games. That's a pretty impressive streak. I don't want to take that for granted, because for a team to win 16 straight at home, we're talking about building on 3-4 seasons now. And you look at the last play of the game, and this crossed my mind. Nolan Smith and Jermaine Johnson with the pressure, and DJ Daniel with the breakup. These are guys that weren't on the team last year, right? Newcomers making an impact, and I'm going to get more into that a little later in the show. Jake Fromm, 27-5 as a quarterback. Jake made some incredible throws. Even the incomplete pass to Tyler Simmons in the back of the end zone was an unbelievable throw. And, maybe it should have been somebody else targeted. Hey, look, let me go ahead and say this. I think the world of Tyler Simmons. I see what kind of a leader he is. I know how much his teammates respect him and how hard he works. But I think the talent of Dominic Blaylock surpasses the equity of Tyler Simmons at this point. It's time to see more of those young guys. And I think we will. If you look at the way this schedule breaks down, it's part of the national championship season. I still believe this is an SEC championship season for Georgia, and depending on their health and their matchup, I believe Georgia has the potential to win the national championship. All depends on those college football playoffs matchups and how healthy the Bulldogs stay. But what I saw from Jake Fromm, when the light went on and when the coaches turned him loose, he was amazing. The throws that Jake made, the pace that he played with, the intensity that I saw, the leadership that I saw. Watching Jake Fromm tuck the ball and run. Now, I don't know if it was the smartest thing in the world, because you don't want to lose. You lose Jake Fromm, and these championship hopes vanish real quick. But to see a guy take it on his shoulders like that to me sent a message to the rest of the team. And talking with Lawrence Cager afterward, the Georgia players said they all fed off of that, right? And Jake Fromm right now is a guy that is playing championship football and showing me championship leadership. And I think moving forward, you will see the Georgia coaching staff put more on Jake Fromm earlier in the game. I thought in hindsight that Georgia was too conservative with this game plan. I think that Georgia underestimated Notre Dame. I think that Georgia thought they could run the ball more effectively. And why wouldn't we think that? Notre Dame ranked 120th in the nation against the run coming into this football game, and Georgia has led the SEC in rushing going on 3 years in a row right now. Georgia has the most prolific offensive line perhaps in program history, and a returning 1,000-yard rusher in DeAndre Swift that probably ranks among the top 4 or 5 running backs in the country. So, of course, we all thought that Georgia was going to be able to dictate the run in this football game. Got to tip your hat to Notre Dame. They played really well. They filled the gaps. I thought they tackled incredibly well in space. That's the best tackling effort from a team I've seen in a long time. I think I'd go back to 2017 Georgia for the last tackling effort that I saw. I thought 2017 Georgia was lights out. I still say they were the best team in the country. I say it every week. I believe it every week. And I think I got to go back to 2017 Georgia defense to find a team that tackled as well as Notre Dame did in that football game. And the end result was that Georgia didn't have a run longer than 16 yards, and that was by Brian Harrion. DeAndre Swift had a 15-yard run. Even when he hurdled a guy, he only got 10 yards on the play. So Georgia did not have the explosive plays that we've become accustomed to seeing the Bulldogs make. So they had to grind this out. And the throws that Jake made against the press coverage, I'll say this too. Notre Dame's cornerbacks were better than Georgia's cornerbacks. Now, Georgia was playing their second-team cornerbacks, but those Notre Dame corners, to man up the way they did, pretty impressive. Really forced Jake into putting the ball in some tight windows and really forced some stepped-up play and some great catches from this made-over receiving corps. I know everyone keeps talking about this being the question mark, but time and time again, these receivers produce. And that's been one of the most impressive aspects of this team is the way that Kirby and his staff were able to kind of fill this team out after what they lost last year. But overall takeaway number one. Georgia's 4-0 and ranked 3rd in the country and relatively healthy. The injuries that they have, and it's a banged-up, beat-up team right now. There is no ifs, ands, or buts about it, but there's no season-ending injuries right now on the Georgia football team. Solomon Kinley, I understand it's his left ankle. We'll see. That was the report that's out there. We'll have a chance to talk to Kirby Smart tonight. I wasn't sure if it was a knee or an ankle. The report I saw on CBS was an ankle. We'll see what Kirby says tonight. Jake Fromm, most importantly, healthy. DeAndre Swift, healthy. Isaiah Wilson came back from his ankle. I thought that was a real boost for the team when Isaiah came in the second half. I thought that really provided a lift. And Cade Mays has been the glue guy all year, and I've made a case as the MVP because of his versatility. But Cade got beat on the perimeter a couple times, and I think he was having a rough night. I think it was very important that Isaiah came back. Kyrus Jackson, he will also be back very soon. Remember, he suffered that broken hand against Notre Dame. You've got a bye week. Maybe we'll see Kyrus against Tennessee. He started the first game in the slot, so that's going to be interesting to keep an eye on. Eric Stokes returned to the game for the last 2 series, had that knee early on, and I'll tell you, when that happened, I just kind of went, all right, wait a minute. This is kind of starting to look like one of these Notre Dame afternoons. You got to understand, folks, I grew up in the Midwest, and so I saw a lot of Notre Dame. And the luck of the Irish is a very real thing. And I'm thinking to myself, this can't possibly happen. But when the weather broke and fell into the 70s, I said, unbelievable. We've had a 100-degree heat index in Georgia for 3 months, and the night Notre Dame comes in here, the ghosts of the Irish come blowing the heat out and give Notre Dame some playing conditions they can handle. Because let me tell you, if it's 100 degrees or 90 degrees, Notre Dame suck and win in the second half, and that game's not close. So the weather broke for Notre Dame. Then Eric Stokes goes out. And that was a concern because the one thing that Notre Dame had that worried me going into this game was big receivers, and it turned out big tight ends. Cole Kmet did his Rob Gronkowski imitation there with 9 catches for over 100 yards. I'm thinking, can somebody cover this guy? Actually, Kirby did make the halftime adjustment. You saw 2 or 3 PBUs in the second half. But yet and still, losing your top 2 corners, because as it turned out, Tyson Campbell wasn't a go. And I'll admit, I was surprised by that. I thought Campbell would be a go. I thought Kirby closed practice last week because he didn't want us to see that Campbell was a go. Because when we saw the injury last week against Arkansas State, we saw him running up and down the sideline on it. We saw him walk out of the stadium without a limp. Now, kind of Riley reported him in a walking protective boot last Tuesday, but Kirby said he was limited and pushed through practice. So I'm thinking, okay, sore foot, this is something. But no Tyson Campbell and no Eric Stokes, and now the weather's cooled off, and Notre Dame gets an early lead and they get some momentum. And then Tyler Simmons fumbles a punt inside the 10, and I'm thinking, whoa, there's a lot of things going on. Now, Brandon Adams and I were sitting next to each other in the press box. Nobody's losing any sleep. neither one of us were biting our nails. But yet and still, it's getting kind of annoying that Notre Dame's sticking around in a game that I thought at least, that Georgia would blow them out in. But give credit to Notre Dame for a good game plan, some breaks win against Georgia that turned the momentum. I know I said on national television that there wasn't a script for Georgia to lose this football game, and it turned out there wasn't, because I thought Georgia played, I don't want to say about as bad as they could have played, but I didn't think Georgia played their best game. I did not think Georgia played their best football game. I did not think that was Kirby Smart's best game plan. And then on the flip side, I thought Notre Dame executed, and I give Notre Dame credit because those guys fought and they played hard, and I don't know how much better Notre Dame could have played, quite frankly. And that's where the crowd comes into it, right? Those 6 false starts. So kind of my takeaway, it's a 3-0 team. It's a team that gets to go back to the lab, that gets to work on some things during a bye week. Takeaway number 2, the newcomers. I wanted to circle back to this because this is one of the most amazing jobs I've seen by a coaching staff of plugging holes and filling gaps. And it's still kind of new with the transfer portal. This transfer game is different. We all know that Georgia lost their backup quarterback, Justin Fields, and it has put them into a position where you really can't afford to lose Jake Fromm. Okay, we know that's bad. Check that off as bad. Luke Ford, you lost him, a 5-star recruit. You don't want to lose a 5-star freshman. They lose him. So that's bad. So right out of the gate, you're thinking, oh, man, this transfer portal, it's going to hurt a program like Georgia where there's so many great players who may not get to play right away. Some of these guys are going to cash out. Well, I look at who Georgia brought in, and I think these guys are all earning their scholarship. Lawrence Cager, let me tell you, he showed up big time. It wasn't so long ago that I was sitting in his apartment in Miami this summer talking to Lawrence about coming onto this Georgia team. And the plan then was that J.J. Holloman was going to be the go-to guy, and Lawrence was going to be a complementary piece. Him or Matt Landers would be on the other side. That's what we thought. I never made any assumptions about Don Blaylock and George Pickens. So I'm thinking Cager's going to be a guy, 15 to 20 catches, red zone guy. But Lawrence Cager stepped up and showed some prime time ability and showed why the NFL teams have interest in him. Jim Nagy, who runs the Senior Bowl, former NFL scout with the Seattle Seahawks and New England Patriots, told me in January that Lawrence Cager was a guy who could end up transferring. And he had a lot of confidence in Lawrence Cager's ability, said a lot of teams were interested in him. You meet Lawrence and you say, well, what's not to be interested in? Here's a 6'4" guy who in high school was one of the top high jumpers in the country. I mean, he's got a 45-inch vertical in high school. I don't know what he does now in a football uniform, but obviously if you're 6'4", 6'5", like Lawrence is, you can get up. Then he earned some equity with the coaching staff with some great open field blocking last week. And Cager this week makes game-changing plays. He got the game ball. We have a little discussion on our little Dog Nation thread with some guys were nominating Devod Wilson because his interception turned the momentum. But Lawrence Cager, the plays that he made on that touchdown drive and that catch he made in the end zone, let me tell you, that's prime time. You're looking at me and Cager. That's the Miami campus right there. It's like botanical gardens there. It's unbelievable. Miami's campus is unbelievable when you look at the aesthetics of it. But Cager, a guy that stepped up, stepped out, and now on his way, leading that receiving corps and really did his job. And what a great get for Georgia. And James Coley's relationship. Now, you may not know this, but Kirby Smart actually recruited Lawrence Cager too when he was at Alabama. And he couldn't get him. And the first thing Kirby said to Lawrence when he called him up after Lawrence had talked with Coley is, I'm not going to lose you this time, am I? And Lawrence likes that story. And I know Lawrence was excited about coming to Georgia. This was a school that he originally had wanted to come to, but they told him, Mark Richt's staff told him in January that they were out of scholarships. And I think he told me that Jason Stanley got the scholarship that he thought he was going to get. So he ended up at Miami with Coley. And, of course, Todd Hartley is very familiar with Lawrence Cager, too. So it was a quick take for Kirby Smart and turned out to be a big take. Eli Wolf, all right? I have been so impressed with Eli, and I covered Eli a little bit when I was at Tennessee, but Eli was playing behind his big brother Ethan at the time, and he was very undersized. He came into Tennessee at 205. Eli is now at 239, and Eli's still running a 40 in the 4.5 range. He tested out over the summer. He's the strongest tight end on the team. Eli Wolf has become a go-to guy. He had a huge third down catch on Georgia's first scoring drive. They go to Wolf, and he got hit by 3 or 4 guys. He got pinballed around. You remember when that happened earlier this year? He had a fumble. This time he held on to it. They sustained the drive, and that was the game-tying drive in the second quarter. Eli Wolf, go-to guy, a guy who has really emerged and filled the shoes of Isaac Nada, not just as a pass catcher, but as a blocker as well. You saw him in that Vanderbilt game at fullback, take out 2 Commodores, and then you saw him also in that game with a downfield block on James Cook. And then DJ Daniel. DJ's on the spot. Tyson Campbell doesn't go. DJ Daniel pressed into action. There were a couple catches, but I thought his coverage was really good. I thought his open field tackling was good, and he was there to knock down the ball at the end of the game. And we haven't even gotten into the freshmen, right? Dominic Blaylock, he is really coming on, folks. And he's a guy that Jeff Santel told us a lot about. It took a little while for Dom to get going, but he's rolling. I thought he was a guy that Georgia should have gone to more. George Pickens, obviously another guy I felt like deserved more than 2 targets. Late in the game, replay showed, and Gary Danielson said, pass interference on that third down play when Jake threw downfield after dropping the ball. Pickens went up, tried to get it. Notre Dame defender had his hand on George's jersey right on the top of his shoulder pads. That could have been called. I thought that the referees let the corners play a little bit more than they should have. That was kind of kept the flags in their pockets and swallowed the whistles a couple times with Notre Dame in pass coverage. I thought the Irish might have caught a break there. Nolan Smith, right? There was Nolan, as I said, Nolan Smith and Jermaine Johnson, 2 more newcomers. There they were on the last play of the game, chasing Ian Book out of the pocket and forcing that throw that even if Notre Dame would have caught it, was at the 15-yard line. Trevon Walker, what he's done is a potential impact player on the defensive line. Georgia's goes about 7-8 deep on that D line. Kenny McIntosh, you saw the run he broke. A little surprised that we didn't see any Zamir White or Kenny in this game. I do realize that in primetime games like this, you go with the experience. And I thought Swift and Harrion were adequate, but I wouldn't have minded seeing Zamir White or Kenny McIntosh in a short yardage situation. My final takeaway number 3, the rest of the SEC East is a disaster zone. And one of the things that has to happen for a team in a championship season is you got to play teams at the right time. So much of it is when you get a team. Right? If you play them early when they're hot or you play them late when they're fading, I think Georgia goes to Tennessee at the right time. Again, Georgia's banged up. They're a little beat up. I don't know that we're going to see the Dogs at full steam at 110% in Knoxville, but they're going to be healthy enough to beat a Tennessee team that's really struggling right now on both sides of the line of scrimmage and at quarterback. Now, say this. Tennessee is the only game in Jake Fromm's career that he did not throw a touchdown pass in. I do think Jeremy Pruitt knows how to do the X's and O's and can scheme them up. And if anybody knows Georgia's talent, it's Jim Chaney. So Tennessee has some built-in advantages with Pruitt and Chaney, but yet and still, I don't think that will be enough to stay close to Georgia or pose much of a threat, I should say. You look at the rest of the schedule coming up in this spurt, home against South Carolina, another team right now that's it's kind of staggered a little bit, quarterback situation there. And then you have home against Kentucky, a team that's coming off a road loss to Mississippi State, a program that's not quite where it was last year. I still think Kentucky is a smidgen dangerous, but I just don't think they have the playmakers to come in and win at Sanford Stadium. So you get a bye week, and then you've got a run of Tennessee, South Carolina, Kentucky, and I think that's a pretty happy October filled with treats. The tricks don't come until after Halloween, when you have to travel to Jacksonville. You're getting on an airplane. It's not a home game. It's not quite a road game, but you're flying to another state and you're playing the Gators. Florida's, I think, playing better now. I think they're getting some confidence. I still don't think that Florida is the biggest threat remaining on the schedule. I think that would be at Auburn. We did a cover 4 on that. I don't know if you've seen that on dognation.com. Jeff Santel with that story. And a home game with Missouri. And Missouri is getting some momentum right now. Kelly Bryant is a dangerous quarterback. I would put him in the same classification of Ian Book. He's a guy who can extend plays and run with the ball. He's a guy who's played in big games before when he was at Clemson, and I think he's a very good leader. And Missouri matched up well with Georgia last year. You'll remember that game in Columbia. Kirby left there, and he said, this win is going to look a lot better later in the season. A lot of respect for Missouri and the way they're able to play at the line of scrimmage. They were able to run the ball in Georgia's defense last year. This Georgia defense is better in the front seven, so that's going to be an interesting task. That's in November, and I get back to my waiting for November theme, which I have carried throughout the season because I think that's when Georgia's championship season will truly be tested. Want to take a look and see if you have any comments or questions here on our Ingles on the Beat segment. Appreciate you joining us each Tuesday. Always enjoy coming in studio and doing the show and communicating with you and getting a chance to kind of share my thoughts and feelings. You know, I did a couple of radio shows yesterday, and I provided some critical analysis of Georgia. And some people said, boy, you're really down on Georgia. And I said, you know, I need to kind of turn this around and let you understand what I'm really saying here. I think it would be an insult to Georgia football to suggest that what you saw Saturday against Notre Dame was the best they could do. It would be an insult to Kirby Smart and his staff to suggest that that was one of his better game plans. Okay, I've seen championship football, great preparation, and great performance from Georgia the last 3 seasons. And what I saw against Notre Dame was a game plan that was too conservative and some players that had some nerves that didn't seem to handle the moment as well as Notre Dame in the first half. Now, they survived it. And, you know, the whole thought that, well, you know, we play in a lot of big games. We've done this before. You know what? No, you really haven't. The guys that are on that team weren't here when game day was here in 2013. It makes a difference when you've got rappers coming into your football building and cameras in front of you while you sing and play football with them. Okay, there was a lot of sideshows. There was a lot of distractions this week. It was a hyped-up game. Everybody's talking about it. The players couldn't escape it. And you also had new coordinators, right? That was Dan Lanning's first big game as a defensive coordinator. And James Coley's been a coordinator other places, but I think being a coordinator for Kirby Smart's difficult because you may have your mindset, but you also know what the head coach wants. And so it's kind of a guessing game. You want to do what you want to do, but you also want to stay within the parameters that the head coach gets you. And it takes games like this for Coley to get on the same length as Kirby. This kind of adversity, right? These kind of crisis moments. When you survive a game like this, it pulls a team and a staff closer together. And it also provides a catalyst for coaches to make changes. You know, one of the worst things that you say, man, we're winning, we're doing everything good. Why make any changes, right? Well, Kirby Smart said last summer that if it ain't broke, make it better. He didn't say if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And I thought it was kind of funny, but I think there was a lot of truth to what Kirby said. If it ain't broke, make it better is his philosophy. Well, it's not broke. Georgia's 3-0, but you better believe they're going to make it better. And I expect there to be some personnel changes. I think some things were learned about different personnel on this team. You can go back and take a look at who was where at different places and wonder if maybe some other pieces might have been better. And again, I'll throw Dominic Blaylock out there. I think he should have been out there fielding punts from the onset. Tyler Simmons is a great guy, but folks, you don't have as much mobility wearing a shoulder brace. You just don't. And I think the coaches might have outthought themselves there. Weston, thank you for your comment. Do good defensive coordinators know Jake Fromm and throw a lot of confusing fronts at him to make him take the short throws? Weston Hedge with a great question there. Absolutely. And Jake said after the game that it took them a little while to figure out what Notre Dame was doing with their fronts. What we all knew was that there was single coverage on the outside. Now, Kirby was particularly careful in this area because he said after the game that Notre Dame had gone 27 straight games of winning when they'd won the turnover battle. And so Georgia was going to be very careful to take care of the ball. Jake has not thrown a pick this year, but Georgia still fumbled the ball 4 times. They were fortunate that they only lost one of them. By my math here, let me take a look here. Go over these stats again. I'm always kind of throwing these stats out here. And fumble returns, fumbles, Georgia fumbled 4 times and lost 1. They were fortunate in that respect. So Kirby was very mindful of the turnover margin, and I think that's why you didn't see Georgia take shots outside earlier with Jake. I think they thought that they were going to be able to run the football more effectively, and I think the halftime adjustment, you saw it in the third quarter, Georgia went with some tempo, and Jake Fromm was on the money. I thought he really played well, and Lawrence Cager stepped up. So, yes, and you're going to keep seeing it, and Kirby knows that. And Kirby says, hey, when Georgia plays teams, we see fronts and blitzes and pressures that we haven't seen all year. People are going to save the good stuff for Georgia. You can bet that Notre Dame wasn't going to use their A stuff on Louisville or New Mexico State. And the Irish have been waiting a long time for this game. So they got their best punch. And Jake had a lot thrown at him, and that's why a lot of times I think they played it safe. Still would have liked to have seen Jake go downfield more. I think it's time to take the restrictor plate off of Jake Fromm. And I think the next 3 games will enable you to do that against the likes of Tennessee, South Carolina, and Kentucky. But right now, you got a 4-0 team that's ranked number 3, and they survived it. Travis Taylor, good thing Kyrus Jackson will be back for that Tennessee game. Quite possibly. When he broke the hand against Vanderbilt, was that August 31st? Kirby said it was 3 to 4 week injury. So we're getting right around that time right now. This is a bye week. I imagine they'll probably ease Kyrus back into this. Maybe we'll see him suit up for Tennessee and get a few snaps. And what you hope is that he's full steam by the time you get to the November portion of your schedule. Scotty Lucas with a great observation here. This is why Jake Fromm is special. He reads defenses and makes correct adjustments. Scotty, let me tell you one more thing that Kirby said I thought was very interesting and haven't had a chance to write about it. But Georgia was late getting some play calls in. And because they were late getting some play calls in, Jake wasn't able to do what he does best, Kirby said, which is change plays at the line of scrimmage. So I think what was happening was because Notre Dame was doing so much disguising of their defenses, I think Coley was wanting to see what Notre Dame was going to do from a personnel package standpoint and a formation standpoint. And that's why the plays were coming in late and instead of earlier. And I think that's something that's going to be fixed. I think that George is going to focus on getting those play calls out there earlier and trust Jake Fromm to do more at the line of scrimmage. You know, an interesting thing Jake said when we talk about the 4th and 1, and I did a story on that earlier today. You may want to check that out on dognation.com. Kirby said he really wanted to go for it. You could tell it irritated Kirby that he didn't feel like he was confident enough to go for it. Kirby Smart believes that his team is going to wear teams down and be able to pick up 4th and 1 in the 4th quarter. That's part of his identity. That's what he wants his teams to be. And the fact that he didn't feel the confidence to go for it really bothered him. You could tell. Now, it was a smart play because the Notre Dame offense really hadn't done anything the whole second half. Now, of course, they come roaring to life and drive 75 yards after that because they still see a light at the end of the tunnel. That was one determined football team. I can't stress that enough. But the fact is that Georgia has had short yardage problems. They got stopped twice against Vanderbilt. You remember DeAndre Swift got dropped for a 3-yard loss on a 4th and 1, and Brian Herring got stopped on a 3rd and 1 against Vanderbilt in the 4th quarter of that football game. So short yardage problems are an issue for Georgia. When you have a bigger team, teams will slant into the gaps. Now that can create some big runs if your back finds that one hole or if there's a breakdown somewhere and they lose gap integrity. But the fact is teams are going to gamble against Georgia on 4th and short, and they're going to plug holes, and it's caused Georgia a lot of struggles on those 4th down plays to the point now where you start to wonder, if maybe you look at pitching it outside, or maybe you look at Jake, tucking and throwing it to the tight end. You got to do some things that are different when you're struggling in short yardage. So. But I thought that was interesting that Kirby Smart brought that up, that they didn't enable Jake to do what he does best, which is make you right at the line of scrimmage with his ability to change plays at the line of scrimmage. So that was a big takeaway for me and something I think that we'll see Georgia improve on moving forward. Let's see what else we have here. Any other questions? Stephanie Bishop, what do you think of Stetson Bennett? Capable quarterback, but the jury is out on what Stetson would do in a big game. He hasn't had the opportunity. Not the biggest guy in the world. Has some limitations. He's 5'10", about 185 pounds. He does have good mobility. I thought he looked really good in the G-Day game. But the pick 6 that he had against Murray State, that scared me. That bothered me. That's not something you want to see. I don't know how the coaches feel about that. But for me, from my standpoint, if I'm a coach, I lose trust on a throw like that. I mean, you got to be better than that, Stetson Bennett. You can't throw pick 6s. That was one of 2 touchdowns George had given up through the first 3 games of the year, and it was from Stetson's arm. Now, I thought he performed a lot better against Arkansas State. What would he have done against that tight coverage at Notre Dame? What would he do against a Florida? What would he do against a Texas A&M or an Auburn? I don't know. So I'm going to say right now, jury is out. I'm not going to write him off, but I don't necessarily think that's a strength. I don't think you can feel comfortable about that. If anything happened to Jake Fromm, I think everybody's holding their breath. It would take quite an effort from Stetson to go, and it's happened before. It'd be a great story as a sports writer. I'm always looking for great stories. For a guy to go from being a walk-on to a junior college transfer to taking over a national championship team, that would be a heck of a story. Not going to say he can't do it, but I haven't seen enough yet to suggest that he could. James Crump feels that Bennett could still win the East. I would agree with that. James feels like that's a ceiling, quite possibly. Travis Taylor says Fromm better come back next year because Bennett and Mathis not ready, and Carson Beck's going to be a true freshman. I'm of the mindset that if Jake Fromm goes pro early, that Georgia gets a transfer quarterback. That's what I believe. David Hall wants to know about Mathis' status, Dwan's status. Still in a holding pattern. Remember, this is a guy who had his skull cut open. I mean, his skull was cut open. His brain was exposed to doctors to operate and get that cyst off May 22nd, May 23rd when that happened. The Georgia medical, here's what you need to know about that. This has been an amazing story. From the time it happened, the way that Kirby handled it, the way the Georgia doctors handled it, the way the teammates have supported Dwan Mathis. This is a guy who dropped under 200 pounds. He lost 20 pounds as a result of the surgery in May. He's back up to weight now. He's out there practicing every day in a uniform. Now, he's not getting hit, but the fact that Dwan Mathis is out there taking reps right now in a Georgia football uniform, what have we, May, June, July, August, September, less than 4 months after he had his brain operated on, it's unbelievable. And this is a story that's going to continue to play out. Ron Corson and his staff doing an unbelievable job, but there's a part of this that is in the hands of a higher power right now. And it's nothing that can be rushed, and it's nothing that can be forecasted. It's just something that is going to take time, and Kirby Smart says he evaluates this every week. Dwan Mathis continues to work hard. Dwan's parents continue to pray and appreciate the support they get from the Georgia fan base. But that's a very special part of what's a bigger story. And this Georgia football season is an amazing story, folks. Make no mistake about it. This has been an incredible year. The 4-0 start has been filled with wonderful stories. The Notre Dame game was more exciting. In hindsight, you'll look back, maybe you'll appreciate that it was a close game instead of a blowout because it gave you some thrills, right? It wasn't just some cartoon with the predictable ending. There were enough plot twists, and you wondered for a moment. I never thought Georgia was going to lose that game, so I was more irritated that Notre Dame was keeping it close because I want to write my story, okay? And I can't because I don't know how they're going to win it yet. But it was more irritating to me, like, George, just put this thing away. Just let Jake throw the ball. Jake will win the game. But Notre Dame wouldn't go away. And so it led to a classic. And if you were a fan that was there, what a memory for you because you were a part of it. You were truly a part of the win. If you made noise, you were a part of the reason that Georgia football won that game. 6 false starts, 3 timeouts burned, and then Georgia treated you with that light show. I mean, the average ticket was $6.15. I haven't heard a person yet say that it wasn't worth the money. What an amazing night for Georgia football. And if you were there, congratulations. What does the headline say? Why is it time for Georgia to unleash Jake Fromm? Well, I'm telling you why. Because that's how Georgia will win a championship this year. The run game has to be there. No doubt about it. You've got to be able to run the football effectively, and Georgia certainly has run the ball effectively. But to win a championship, I believe you've got to show more offense. I think the day of sitting on the lead is over with. And the Alabama games are bad memories, folks. I get it. Being up 2 touchdowns on Alabama and losing both those games sucks. That's the only word I can that's the word that fits it. It stinks. It's not good. Nobody wants to remember it. And for a moment there, when Notre Dame got the ball back with 2 minutes left, you're going, is this going to happen again? I think when you've got a quarterback like Jake Fromm, and I think Kirby realizes it too, because Kirby Smart said, we didn't let Jake do what he does best, which is manage the game. I think you will see Jake Fromm in more control of this offense. I think you're seeing Jake Fromm build trust with these receivers, these new receivers, right before your eyes. Lawrence Cager now is a go-to guy for Jake Fromm. Dominic Blaylock is a go-to guy that Jake Fromm has said he trusts. George Pickens continues to earn trust, needs to do more things away from the ball, but the effort and the heart and the talent and the upside is there. I said the other day that I thought George Pickens was the most talented receiver in the SEC in terms of his upside. I'm not backing off that. I think his upside is unbelievable, and that's with all due respect to the speedy receivers at Alabama. George Pickens has size and speed and things that you simply cannot coach. It's just got to mature before our eyes. George needs to continue to get better, and I think the Georgia coaching staff is doing what they can to keep George between the lines and grow him into this dynamic player that we know he can be. He makes these sensational catches appear routine, and if not for a couple pass interference penalties, I think George Pickens would have had a couple more remarkable catches against Notre Dame. Sharonda Taylor says, Kirby and the gang can never go vanilla. It has costed us in the past. Sharonda, it has. I understand the logic. I've seen coaches with a defensive mindset go this route before. It's percentage football, okay? If you're a defensive coach, you're thinking to yourself, okay, maybe I can win this game going for it on a 4th and 1 play, and it's a 50-50. But what are the odds if I kick the field goal that Notre Dame drives the length of the field? If you're Kirby Smart, you're thinking, these guys didn't even have a first down in the third quarter. They haven't scored a touchdown. The only touchdown they got was when Georgia gift-wrapped it by fumbling the punt at the 8-yard line. So you're thinking to yourself, they haven't scored a touchdown on us all game. They're not going to do it now. And you put your trust in your defense. And he's done that before, yes. And the defense has let him down. Yes, that happened twice. And special teams has let him down. And it almost let him down again. I think, and that's why I said, I think what we're going to see, and this is why Connor wrote a tremendous headline today for On the Beat, why it's time to unleash Jake Fromm is because now it's time to put the game in Jake's hands. Because now it's time to trust Jake Fromm to win the game instead of the and not your defense still has to play well, but put it on Jake Fromm. Don't put it on a fake field goal. Don't put it on a fake punt. Don't put it on your defense. Put it on your third-year quarterback and the guy that's a winner. All he does is win. The national championship game 2 years ago, Jake Fromm won that game. The secondary lost it. That game was won. I was there. I was on the sideline. The game was over. Jake Fromm won the football game. The secondary lost it by breaking an assignment. 2nd and 26, that game's over. Okay? Last year against Alabama, Jake Fromm did enough to win that football game. Now, I didn't like what they did in the final minute because I didn't think that their passing game was as well-oiled as it needed to be. I thought there was a lot of fourth quarters last year that were squandered because Kirby was running out the clock or he was trying to make Justin Fields happy or whatever, instead of getting that championship quarterback groomed. And so when the lights came on and there was a minute left and Georgia needed a touchdown against Alabama, I didn't feel like Jake was ever really in sync with Riley Ridley last year. I never really felt that click. I never really saw that. I never really felt that comfort. For all the talent they had, the 3 NFL wide receivers, the guys that got drafted, Riley Ridley, Mecole Hardman, and Terry Godwin, I never felt like Jake Fromm could complete a pass in the dark to those guys. I saw breakdowns late in the season. Even when Georgia was playing their best, there were times when the receiver went one way and Jake threw the other. This receiving core, however, I feel like this receiving core is a big statement. Can't believe I'm going to say it. I feel better about Georgia's passing game right now than I did last year with these newcomers. I feel better about Lawrence Cager and Dominic Blaylock and George Pickens than I did with last year's group. I feel like there's more upside. I feel like there's as much, if not more, talent. And Demetrius Robertson, let's throw him in there. And Eli Wolf. I thought, when Isaac Nautic last, oh, man, you can't replace Isaac. Boom. Eli Wolf has just slid in there and been amazing. I mean, this guy has caught everything through. He's made some really good catches. He's made some really good blocks, and he's faster than NOTRE. NOTRE was a 4.8 guy at the combine. Wolf's running a 4.59. I feel better about this pass game, and that's why it's time. Now, maybe Kirby's saying, look, I know that. We just had to get through September. Would everybody relax? We just wanted to make sure we didn't lose that game. We had it covered, right? I felt like Georgia had it covered. I did. I never thought they were going to lose that. When Notre Dame got the ball back at their own 48 with 2 minutes left, I was kind of going, this can't happen. Surely this can't happen. Surely not. And it didn't. because there was the Georgia pass rush and there was Dan Lanning turning those guys loose. And that's what I believe this staff and this team's all about. As Kirby said, they fight, they adjusted. I didn't like the game plan at the start. I'm not going to lie to you. I thought Notre Dame had a better game plan. I thought Notre Dame had better use of their personnel. But you couldn't overcome Kirby, his players, and his crowd. And the crowd was the difference. I mean, it was a big difference. 6 false starts. I'll never forget that game. I've covered a ton of games. I will never forget that game. I will never forget 6 false starts and 3 timeouts burned against Notre Dame. I will never forget that. It was an amazing night. Joshua Campbell says, halftime adjustments were the key on defense. No doubt about it. In the first half, this Cole Kmet guy, I'm thinking, where did this big guy come from? And how does a guy that big get that open, right? I mean, this was a guy who'd been out with a broken collarbone, and it's like Brian Kelly. It was like he was a secret weapon. I mean, or was it Rob Gronkowski wearing that uniform? Because this big guy was making plays. You saw the Georgia guys trying to tackle him. They're bouncing off him. I mean, who is this guy? I mean, we're going to hear more about Cole Kmet. I mean, the catch in the end zone he made, it's like throwing for somebody else. And he puts his big paw up there. I'm calling this guy's unbelievable. Cole Kmet. In the second half, they adjusted. And LeCount put a pretty nasty shot on him. I mean, Richie LeCount brought it, right? Rat Trap Richie, as Kirby calls him when he breaks assignments. I thought LeCount had a good game. I really did. I thought LeCount showed up. I thought LeCount accounted for himself quite well. And he deserves credit for that, because that hasn't always been the case with Richard in the big games. Tracy Shiver, can you help get Kirby more money? He makes about $7 million. I think he can help himself by winning a championship. You know, one of the more interesting offseason stories I thought was pretty interesting. Georgia loses the high-priced coordinators. Mel Tucker goes to Colorado. And by the way, Colorado doing a great job right now. Mel Tucker off to a great start. Everybody's got great things to say about him. Lose Jim Chaney. Not such a great start for Jim Chaney. But when they lost those guys, those were $1 million coordinators. Georgia's coaching staff actually makes less money than they did last year. I will challenge you to find another top 10 program that took a pay cut on their coaching staff last year. So that's pretty interesting. Look at Amos Williams. Amos wants Cole Kmet on the Falcons. Hey, I want Cole Kmet. I want him on my fantasy football team. That guy was the real deal, man. David Hill. Were we cheating to help second-string cornerbacks that left the tight end open? I don't know if you mean like maybe cheating safeties over there? Quite possibly. That might have been the adjustment. That's a good observation, David Hill. Did I say something wrong here? You mean Simmons, probably. Caleb. Zach Evans, that's a Jeff Santel question. I need the mascot on the desk with me. I'll work on that. I've actually got sort of a mascotty thing I can use. Clune Mate says, can we get James Cook more involved other than the jet sweep? Yes. That was one of the personnel things that I did not like. I thought the fact that James Cook didn't touch the ball to the fourth quarter on a jet sweep was an oversight. Now, that said, Brian Herring ran the ball really well, and DeAndre Swift is DeAndre Swift. So the problem with getting James Cook the ball is you're taking the ball out of the hands of one of those two guys. And, Herring ran hard and really I thought provided a spark. He had that 16-yard run that kind of really sparked a scoring drive and kind of woke the offense up a little bit. So I can kind of understand why you stuck with Brian in the hot hand. And DeAndre, like I said, is DeAndre. But still, I think you got to find a way to get Cook involved. Maybe he was more of a decoy for this game. I don't know. But to me, Ro Hawkins, why did Matt Landers run the jet sweep? To me, that was an oversight on personnel. Maybe that's a play that Demetrius Robertson runs. We saw Tyler Simmons run it, maybe even Don Blaylock. But I haven't seen that kind of speed from Matt Landers to run the jet sweep yet. And again, I want to be fair to Matt because the jury's out. He did some really good things in the spring. But right now, when I talk about the best receivers on Georgia's team, I need to see more from him. There was a throw Jake had, a deep throw against Arkansas State that I think an elite receiver puts the burst on and brings in. I was talking with Chris Doring about this Friday, and he saw the same play. And I just don't know if Matt's got that gear. He's come a long way. I think he's got more to go. Right now, I would not say he's one of the top 3 or 4 targets for Georgia. Still a valuable guy. Kirby and Georgia use a lot of players. One of the secrets to a championship team is championship depth. You saw that play out against Notre Dame. The fact that you were down your 2 starting cornerbacks 2 plays into that game against a really good quarterback in Ian Book, who did live up to the hype, by the way. I was very impressed with him. Let's see. Any more questions before we go here on the beat? Kind of winding down. Got to get back to Athens for practice. Pickens was in trouble. Probably, Shelton Tucker says. Well, what happened was after one play, there was an exchange with a Notre Dame player, and I think coaches didn't like that. So in a sense, maybe he was in quote-unquote trouble, but maybe that's coaching saying, look, George, you can't lose it in a big game like this. We can't have you get a 15-yard penalty. We're going to sit you and cool you off a little bit until you realize that you got to control your emotions. Or as Lawrence Cager said, you can't do anything about it on after the play. You take those frustrations out on the next play. And again, folks, what we're seeing from George Pickens, remember, we're talking about an 18-year-old kid. And that's the thing you got to remember. They're still kids. There's still things going on in their life outside of football that regardless of how focused they are, and this Georgia program is as focused as any I've ever been around. There's still things going on in their life, and there's still time where they need to grow. And the cool thing about watching this Georgia team is you're watching these guys grow right before your eyes. And Kirby Smart knows how to communicate with young people. One of the best things that came out of the coaching changes, and it's still too early to say that Georgia's better off without Jim Chaney or Mel Tucker. Nobody's going to make that proclamation. Those are 2 incredibly decorated and veteran coordinators. Arguably the best combination of coordinators in the country last year from an experience standpoint and resume standpoint. Way too early to say that Dan Lanning and James Coley are a step up from that. But what I will say is this staff got a lot younger, and this staff seems a lot closer to the team this year. The chemistry this year is a step up from where it was last year. You can say it's whether it was about the quarterbacks or whether it was about the huge leadership void that Roquan left, but this team is put together better from a chemistry standpoint than last year's team. I'm not ready to say that 2019 Georgia is better than 2017 Georgia yet. I'm not ready to say that. What I will say is that 2019 Georgia has more potential than 2017 Georgia. 2017 Georgia was rock and roll, man. When I saw those guys show up in Knoxville and put down that 41-0 beatdown and with Peyton Manning there, I said, this is the best team in the country. This is the best team I've seen in a long time. I mean, they did everything well. They left zero doubt. I still need to see that killer instinct from this group. I need to see this year's Georgia team stomp somebody and leave no doubt. The 30-6 win over Vanderbilt left some room for improvement. Georgia did not score a touchdown the last 38 minutes of that game. Had a problem with that. The win over Notre Dame, 23-17, historic, classic. Georgia did not go for the kill shot on the 4th and 1. Georgia did not run out the clock when they got the ball back at their own 25. Okay? I need to see this team put down a kill shot. I need to see this team dominate an SEC-level opponent, and we may see that in Knoxville in 2 weeks. We'll find out. We're going to see some changes, though. If there's one thing I know about Kirby Smart, and I'll go back to what he said this summer, and I love this saying, if it ain't broke, make it better. I'm going to leave this show right there on that note. I appreciate everybody watching. If you've got more questions, ask them, more comments. I appreciate it. Thanks for watching Ingles on the Beat. I'll be back next Tuesday. Check us out on Dog Nation. We'll have a lot more stories, and I will have my my trimester report card for Georgia as we got through the first third of the season later this week.